Good morning. Good morning. Today is June the 3rd of the year 2024. Once again, the first Monday of June. And I say once again because we recorded 2 podcasts this week, this being the second.
Yes.
Because there was some happenings that had happened here.
Yes.
This is actually a special edition of the Dear Church podcast. That is why, that's not why, it's Sunday. That's why we are dressed to the nines, both you and I.
You're dressed well today.
Thank you. Many
Usually
people
dressed in sweats and stuff.
That's somewhat true.
One time.
But today is a special edition because right after we recorded last week, there was a big news story, an earth-shattering, earth-rumbling, earth-grumbling news story. And that was on May the 30th. You know, normally when you hear 34 for 34, you would think that was a great exam that you took. That was a great night of basketball that you had. But in this case, 34 for 34 guilty. Former President Donald Trump announced guilty on 34 felony charges of falsifying business records to hide a hush money payment to an adult film star. I know that this has been happening for a long time, but the verdict came out this past Thursday, not with Ted Cruz. It came out last Thursday, 34 felony charges. And I know that there's a lot of different views on this. Joe Biden immediately actually defended the court's decision, saying that the American principle that no one is above the law was reaffirmed. That's what Biden said at the White House after this decision. Trump, very upset about this decision, said this is a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people, and they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. And so there are a lot of different...
You did an impression of doing that. Why don't you do that
No,
here?
that was before the camera. I can't do that one.
Okay. You had a really good impression. Okay.
I can't do it. I don't have a good Donald Trump. But... So these differing views, and I know that there are a lot of concerns on how the procedure even went down. A lot of people are saying that the way that the judge handled this situation was unconstitutional. Like, for example, you're supposed to have a unanimous vote on all the charges. There was no unanimous vote. There was no single underlying crime that they could pinpoint. And so it's actually very, very complicated. And there is a great podcast that I listened to this morning, actually.
Oh, yeah?
By The Morning Wire. They have a former attorney, I believe, on, and she kind of explains why this situation is so complex, what people are saying. Does Trump's case have a chance at appeal? What's going to happen to the presidential election? All these different things. And so they answered those questions that I thought pretty well.
Okay.
But I'm curious, though, Pastor Eugene, as I know that you follow the news very, very closely. How do you view this? And maybe not just you, but as a Christian, seeing this is the first time that a former president has ever been charged and convicted guilty of a crime. He's a felon at this point legally.
Yeah, I think the talking points that his opponents are using are things like convicted felon.
Yep.
And no one is above the law.
Yep, that's their thing, yeah.
So you'll hear this over and over again. And one of the things that I am sort of saddened about is the fact that now it's not just about politics, it's about politicking.
Yep.
With the case. So let me explain what I mean by that. Politics is something that we're all involved in. We all have feelings, we all have proclivities when it comes to, let's say, immigration, or how we, distribute certain taxpayer funds and things of that nature. And politics all is involved with that. But politicking is not when you're forced to be in one side, like one extreme side. So now there are only 2 sides that you can take when it comes to the Trump trial, and they're both extreme sides.
Yeah.
And you're forced into these places, meaning there is no more middle ground that you could really take. And that is something that I think we can all agree to be saddened about. I don't think people can really take a no stance on it, because a no stance would be not understanding what actually went down when Trump was charged and Trump was convicted of
Yeah.
these 34 felony counts.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. I think people are kind of divided on this. You know, one side is hashtag got him, other side is free Donnie. So, I mean, as a Christian, where do we align on this? And why is this so important though? And you just said, like, if you don't know this, I mean, this is something that we have to know. Why is this so important? Why is this so earth shattering that this happened?
Yeah, well, anytime, let's say, a precedent has been broken, I think we should know why. I think as informed voters, we should know why, let's say, a norm was now broken. And so one of the things that we have understood throughout the history of the United States is you don't prosecute your political opponents.
Yep.
It's people were tempted, even from the founding fathers, people wanted to get Thomas Jefferson out. People
TJ.
would have duels over it.
Yeah.
And this is how people fought. They debated vigorously over things, but to use the legal system to jail your opponent would be something that we would call lawfare. It's their warfare. It's lawfare. It's legal warfare. And this is what the vast majority of people see this indictment and now prosecution and now conviction of Donald Trump as. They see it as a lawfare. And when people see that, then there has been a line that's crossed. And the concern now is it can't be uncrossed. So once you start prosecuting, jailing, convicting your political opponents, and then, that's a Pandora's box. I'm sure you've heard of the statement. And so it does affect Christians. It does affect everybody in this country. Because let's say someone doesn't like Christians. Well, according to our legal system, I'm sure there's something in the books that can that can put you guilty for something. There's a saying where, even my friend who's a cop, he would go into a Dunkin' Donuts with me, and we'd share a cup of coffee. But he would say things like, and this is absolutely true, as he walks into the Dunkin' Donuts, as he walks in and walks into the table that I'm sitting in and sits down, he can see 7 infractions of the law just as he's walking. So he could put these people under arrest. He could, bring the law against them. Why doesn't he do that? There's another saying that people know that if you're a cop and you really want to give someone a ticket, all you have to do is follow them for a minute. I'm sure you've heard about that. You just follow them for 1 minute, and there's always something that you could get someone on. Why doesn't that happen? Why does it feel wrong to us that someone might want to do that? Because it's not about justice then. Because people are saying like, oh, it's, justice has been served. Not in this case. And I don't think you could see it this way, because if you are just looking to get somebody and then you get them, is that justice? If I'm like, I don't like Sam, I'm going to go after him. I'm going to use everything in the legal books, in the laws, to make sure that he's at least found with some infraction of some obscure law so that I can put him in jail. And the way they did this was so spectacular that even pro-Democrat, anti-Trump legal experts would say, and this is not just from what you've heard, but the anti-Trump legal experts are saying this is not just a zombie case, because this is what the DA was saying. This is a zombie case because they're just pulling all these things and bringing things back to life. Things that are past the statute of limitations, but they're just reviving these things. But it's not. There was another legal expert that actually worked with Manhattan DA, and he wrote an article for the New York Magazine, which is not a conservative magazine. And he started to lay down the facts that this is not just only a zombie case, this is a Frankenstein case. You're just putting together dead parts and trying to revive it with life again. And hopefully having that stick. There are some undeniable facts that we could talk about. And those things will help inform us to try to kind of see the bigger picture of what's happening. First of all, people know that to get a case, it's kind of like, you get picked, like, you pick a straw. a hat or something like that. But for some reason, this Judge Merchan just happens to get all the Trump cases. How is that? How is that possible? People are saying he has the next Trump case, which deals with one of his associates, one of his cabinet members, Steve Bannon. And so, how does he get that case too? How does he get so many of these cases when we know he is an avid anti-Trumper? In fact, he did break the rules. He had a violation of a rule prohibiting New York judges from making political donations of any kind. But he made the political donation to not just a pro-Biden, but an anti-Trump political operation, and including funds that the judge earmarked for, quote, resisting the Republican Party and Donald Trump's radical right-wing legacy. This is not just a person that happens to be a Democrat. This is a anti-Trump Democrat.
Specifically anti-Trump.
Yeah, specifically. And then who's the prosecutor? It's Alvin Bragg. Everybody knows that Alvin Bragg ran for office, and he is the one that ran for office on the platform that he will get Trump.
Yep.
He said on his campaign trail, which was false, by the way, that he has sued Trump over 100 times. So he specifically ran on the platform for DA in New York so that he could get Trump. Remember, if I run for a platform, let's say if I run on the platform and saying, I want you to elect me because I'm going to get Sam, people should be like, that's weird. I know something's off maybe with Sam, but you shouldn't run for just to get Sam. That's not really carrying justice. It's just out to get somebody. And so I do believe that these two officials in New York City are not just only questionable. It's proven that what they have laid out is bad. It's actually what they're doing is actually evil.
So, I mean, and I know that the court case was held in New York City, in a blue state, and so I'm sure the jury would have been more likely than not Democrat. And so I know people are talking about this bias and how maybe even unfair the setting was, but couldn't we say that about any court case? So, for example, if this court case was held in the Deep South, where Trump has a lot of popularity, then I'm sure Trump may have won, right? And so, like, we can say that about any case, really. So then what are we saying about the justice system as a whole?
Yeah, I don't think that really is a good argument, to be honest. I think what the jury decides, so there is a notion in America, which I think is good. Whatever the jury decides is pretty sacrosanct, meaning whatever the jury decides, we kind of hold to be dear.
Yeah.
And of course, there's an appeal process. The appeals process is because of the way things went down was off. Not just simply the verdict, okay?
Yeah.
And the way things went down, so I don't actually blame the jury as much as maybe some others might. I actually see this as a case where they brought it to the jury saying, this is the reasons, these are the stipulations for which you can convict, which is off, this is wrong. That's actually not the reason why. You can't, let's get to the 34 felony counts. It's basically when you categorize a check that Trump wrote, he just categorized it wrong. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to bring in legal experts that wanted to talk about what campaign financing is, what campaign funds are. But the judge would block that. Why would you block that? Because even if it's a left-wing person talking about campaign financing and campaign funds, it would have went against the narrative, meaning the judgment that the judge and the prosecutor already wanted. Because let's talk about campaign finances. If this was truly a payment that for hush money that was paid off by Donald Trump, he just had to categorize it in a certain way. If it's campaign finances, then how do you know what campaign finances are? It's a really, really gray area. So this is what the debate should have been about, or could have been about. Like, let's say you get finances, you get some funds for your campaign, and what can you use it on? You know?
Yeah.
Something that helps you get elected, yes?
Maybe even the gym.
Maybe plastic surgery, maybe teeth whitening. I don't know. Whatever it is. And then you categorize it as such. Mm-hmm. and someone can come after you, you should be able to defend it. This is kind of a gray area. People usually don't go after people unless it's egregious, right? And so this could have been perhaps one of those cases. It may not have been. Did he categorize it as such? Did he say this is a campaign finance, or did he do it out of his own money? Did he record it as such, and did he mess up on the records in recording it when it was campaign finances and it was just a personal thing, and he did both?
Right.
And so it gets kind of murky, and that's what they got him on. So every time you write a check to Cohen, and Cohen then would pay Stormy Daniels, right? They would say this is a felony or something to that effect.
Yeah.
First of all, it's because they have to go back to saying the underlying charge was actually something that they convicted Trump of, which is a federal case. This is campaign finances are federal cases because he did this in his campaign trail, running for federal office. But what they did was they said, you know what, we're just going to assume that he's guilty of this. And that means all the stuff that he did in New York, we can charge him with.
Yeah, right.
So that's where the Frankenstein comes in. It's like, well, you can't do that because he wasn't convicted in any federal court of this as a crime. So jurisprudence has not been taken place. You didn't actually play out the way this should have done. This should have been played out. And you didn't actually say this was a federal, violation that you now want to bring into the state. But if you go even further, I'm going to go and quote what this lawyer said in the New York Magazine. Again, not a right-wing writer at all. In fact, New York Magazine is very left-wing. And then so this is what he writes. I'm going to quote, "But when you impose meaningful search parameters, the truth emerges. The charges against Trump are obscure and nearly entirely unprecedented. In fact, no state prosecutor in New York or Wyoming or anywhere has ever charged federal election laws as a direct or predicate state crime against anyone for anything. None. Ever. Even putting aside the specifics of election law, the Manhattan DA itself almost never brings any case in which falsification of business records is the only charge," which is what they did to Trump.
Right.
And so when you look at that, people are saying this flies against all the stuff that people are saying this is law and order. This is going against what they're claiming. This is law and order. You can't, let's say, use something where the statute of limitations have passed and then use that as a basis of charging someone for something that happens after. And I'm no, let's say, legal expert in this manner, but I imagine it to be, you can't say, Sam, you went to the store, and then because you went into the store illegally, you damaged all these things. So I'm going to charge you for the damage. But you were never charged for going to the store.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Why are you charging me for the damage of these things? I was never in the store. It's like, well, I'm going to assume that you've been in the store. That's weird. Mm-hmm. That's not only weird, but you wouldn't ever think that that's a good case to follow through. And yet, this state prosecutor decided to do that because he went after Trump. And that's why people are very upset. That's why people are saying, even in the Manhattan DA, the employees working for the district attorney, they called the case a zombie case. That's why you heard the word zombie case. They're the ones calling it a zombie case. This is a bizarre way of charging someone for felonies. You just cobble things together. It's ugly, it's awkward, doesn't make any sense. And then the judge says these are the standards by which you can convict to a jury, which a jury will just follow what the judge says.
Right,
the jury's
right.
not just going to decide how to, convict or not convict on their own merits or what they think is right. The judge sets the standards. And so you will see Trump appeal, but until he has that time to appeal, you will see those two things being said. No one is above the law, and he is a convicted felon.
So we know that the sentencing is set for July 11th, which is actually 4 days before the Republican something.
Yeah.
GOP is grand old party, no?
Yep. That's when they announce the presidential candidate.
Right. So people are saying that the timing is weird. That this is all, like you said, they're weaponizing the legal system. There was actually another tweet from, I forget where it was. It was somewhere in Eastern Europe. I think a president tweeted, "We too know how evil it is when the courts are used as a weapon." And here is America doing the same thing now.
Yeah, when people go to other countries and it's like, what's going on in America? Because this is exactly what we do here, like in their third world country.
Yeah.
That's something to be concerned about. I just want us to make sure that we know what is going on because, first of all, I don't want us to confuse the two where there is legal merit or it's not really legal versus what the moral standards
That's what I want to get to as well, yeah.
So if we were to get to it, is what Trump did right? Well, if he did sleep with Stormy Daniels, which he is saying he didn't, that's wrong. That's morally reprehensible. But there are other reasons why you might pay some hush money to someone to say that you didn't sleep with them. First, there are many reasons that you could do it, right? If someone comes and just causes problems, it's like, you know what? Sign this NDA, we'll pay you some money and go away. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's some, so that we don't have to deal with like your opponents really picking up on this. And so there are some reasons why you might do that. If that's the reason why you don't like Trump, then that's also odd because, paying off a porn star, making them sign an NDA, and giving them hush money in that sense would make Bill Clinton literally look like a Boy Scout. Bill Clinton gave $840,000 to keep hush money. There's also, and I think I sent this to you, right? There's also an article in 2017 on November 16th. CNN put out an article saying Congress paid out $17 million in settlements. $17 million in settlements, and that was taxpayer money for hush payments.
Yep.
So Congress is the one that did $17 million worth of it. And here we are getting this man. Now, is it right or wrong? Obviously, any kind of hush money payment is suspect. But people have been doing it for whatever their personal reason. And when we say, oh, my goodness, he shouldn't have paid Stormy, he shouldn't have slept with Stormy, he wasn't convicted of it. Why are you immediately charging a man with something where he hasn't even been found guilty of doing it? And so there are reasons why that you might do it. Now, do I think that he slept with it? I think that's irrelevant. I know people give their own opinions. So what if he slept with her? So what if he didn't sleep with her? He might not have. I think that's irrelevant because the point of the matter is that we don't know. He's not been convicted. No one's proven anything. It's he said, she said. He didn't go to court to actually figure that out, right? That wasn't why the court was there. Like, they didn't defend Trump saying, why don't you put up a case? Oh, we are convicting you of sleeping with Stormy. That's not the case. The point was he paid her money through Michael Cohen, right?
So the question I think some Christians may have, though, is, okay, this is obviously a very high-profile case, which is why there's so much publicity, pointed towards it. But like you said, as a Christian, we're not just voting as an American voter. We're voting as a Christian voter. And supporting a man that is morally not great is tough. And I know that, we could say, well, this person gave this much money. This person gave this much money in terms of hush money, and they did wrong too. But at the same time, if someone that gave hush money and it's sus, and we know that can be morally wrong, got caught, it's not a good thing though. Like, sure, people may not have been caught, but this one did though, and that's one less criminal off the streets. Isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, first of all, paying hush money is not a crime. That's not the crime he was charged with. So I think people are confusing it. So that's a good point. That's not the crime that Trump was charged with. It's falsifying records.
It's the bookkeeping,
It's
right?
bookkeeping that he was charged with. It's not the paying off. So I get it that morally we can distinguish saying if he did sleep with her and he paid her off, that's a wrong.
Yep.
That's wrong that
Yep.
he did it. That's fine. I would completely agree with you. I don't think any Christian should disagree with that
Yep.
if he did. Now, is there any reason to believe that he did or that he didn't? Sure. I think there are, you can believe one or the other. I just don't think that it's been prosecuted. It's not been in the courts.
Right,
We don't know for sure.
We don't know.
I guess you could imagine like, he probably did because he was such a playboy back then. What was it, like in 2006 or whatever it was when this happened? So, of course, he was a playboy back then. Sure, he made us up with a lot of people and things like that. And so the point is, though, you take what was a misdemeanor charge and then you start to inflate it to the lowest class of felony. You take a class E on class of felony charges from class A to class E. So you bring this misdemeanor charge up to a class E. And then you say that because, no longer the statute of limitations will apply. And then the way that they do it is because when you allege that the falsification of business records was committed with the intent to commit another crime, that's how they can bring it to a class E.
Right.
Now that's so convoluted, even the average person would be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
are you adding this extra line of another crime that he did this so that he could do another crime when we don't even know what the original crime was? So he's charged with the intent to commit another crime when you weren't even charged with the crime. And so these are things that people have really been worked up about. This is, and there's some really good articles out there, of course, by the New York Magazine that you could look up. But Al Mohler did a really good one too.
did, yep.
You could read his works online. They are, in this case was crafted specifically to go after Trump.
Yep.
And this is not only something that was already massively debated within legal voices, whether you could even bring this to court or not. I think when you see this, people are now what I'm concerned about is we've come to the age of politicking, and so people get really worked up for one or the other. And I do think that it's something to be sober-minded about. It's something that we should be reminded. You need to be sober-minded. You need to know the facts. You can't just assume things because you don't like someone, but you should also at the same time demand virtue, demand integrity, demand that we have an impartial administration of the law. When it comes to the law, it should be impartial. We need equal weights and measures. So yeah, if this truly is a crime, then let's get everybody in jail. Biden should be in jail. All the Congress people should be in jail. So many people should be convicted and in jail. It's like, yeah, that's great. Let's start with Trump and get everybody. I don't think that's what the point is for these people. And that's why when you start to jail your political opponent only, this is a dangerous place for us to be in. And the reason why I think this is so big is because the whole world looks at the United States. And yeah, their countries do it, but there was a place where they didn't do it. There was a higher standard that all the nations of the world could look up to. And for better or for worse, it was the United States. We have been unfortunately going down a path where I do believe that, I think it was Megyn Kelly who said it, this is an opening of the Pandora's box. There is no going back, because once the opposition party gets in power, guess who's going to be prosecuted? Guess who's going
party.
to jail?
Right.
Yeah. And if that's the case, then we do have a banana republic. It's just about maintaining power because you don't want to go to jail. And so because of the threat of jail, the threat of imprisonment, the threat of prosecution and conviction, you need to stay in power because you obviously did a lot of things while you were president.
Yeah.
That wasn't perfect. Again, this is not to excuse imperfection. This is not to excuse any kind of sin. we should always remember that sin is bad, and we should uphold to the best degree, to the highest degree, the moral standards that we see. And we should especially hold these standards to our leaders, which I think is very important. This is why so many Christians are so conflicted with Donald Trump, who they know has many moral failures, and also when they look at Biden, who has a ton of moral failures as well. So what do we do in those cases? And that's why people have been struggling, and rightfully so. You know, you don't want to vote for someone and give off the impression that you are condoning a certain behavior when you're not. But at the same time, there is a difference between Donald Trump and, you know, the incumbent president. And that is the laws that they spout, the things that they are standing for. Is it Christian?
Yeah.
Is it not? And so there are some clear differences here that Christians should not ignore. And so this is where we need to be sober-minded. You need to be sober-minded. You can't just think one way because you just don't like somebody. And I don't know if a lot of people that are listening to this podcast do have DTS, but DTS is real.
What's DTS?
TDS.
TDS?
That's right. TDS.
I know TBS.
No, TDS. TDS is a Trump derangement syndrome.
Oh.
So whenever it comes to Trump, people just go nuts. People just, you know, have vitriol come out of their mouths and things like that, which is, you know, if you're in the church, you're disciplinable. We are not to do that, but we are to state the cases as clearly and as sober-mindedly as possible.
So is this a big enough issue for us to be praying about? And if so, how do we even pray about? Like, are we praying for Donald to be free? Like, what are we praying for?
I think when you use lawfare against your political opponents, it's the end of an era for sure. When we talk about like the end of Rome, this is exactly what happened. So people would use the law there to imprison their political opponents, and then when the other party came into power, they used that to imprison their political opponents. And you could actually see that happening at the end of Rome. It's not just one event that's the end of an empire. I hope people understand that. People think like it's always like this one massive event.
Yeah.
That usually doesn't happen. It's always a series of events. And with each event, you see the foundations crumbling. And this is one of those events where we'll see July 4th, 1776 to May 30th, 2024, and we'll remember that. We'll remember this day as this was a special moment in history where through this time we never had something like this happen. And then all of a sudden we see a conviction of a political opponent, and no one really doubts this was a conviction of a political opponent. We went after him because we didn't like him. And that's not the way the law works. If you did that, that would be a terrible place to be in, because people will start to say, well, what about this? What about that? So the opponents of this will say things like, well, didn't they find cocaine in Biden's house? How come there's no investigation on that? Didn't someone die in Obama's estate? How come there's no real investigation about that? You know, there was a male prostitute in Nancy Pelosi's house. No real investigation about that. There was a server that Hillary Clinton bleach bitted and erased like 30,000 plus emails when those emails met.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
There was nothing on that.
Yeah.
And so all these things happen. So, yeah, you know what we should do? We should have the FBI raid Trump's estate for some documents. What happened with people are going to say what happened with all the people on the Epstein list? There's nothing that's happening about that. What about the fact that we do know now for sure that there was gain of function research that Fauci, Anthony Fauci did okay and was a part of? What about that? What about, Mayorkas having people, just millions and millions of people just walk through our border What about that? What about even Nancy Pelosi's insider trading?
Yeah.
You know, there is a little tracker that you can follow whenever Nancy Pelosi makes a trade, that you can actually follow along with it.
And you just do the same
And
thing?
a friend of mine actually decided to do that, and he made money. So,
Wow.
what about that? What about the fact that Planned Parenthood is known? We all know they take aborted baby parts and they sell it. What about that? All these terrible, really evil things that are going on, which are clearly against the law. And there's no prosecution for that. There's no seeking of justice in those cases when there is a clear. And then you know what we decide to do is, you know what? We'll celebrate that we get Donald Trump on $130,000 of a hush money payment to a porn actress. I just don't think those two are equal. They're not of equal weight. And you can disagree with me, and that's why we have debate forums and like that. And if you know me, I am not a pro-Trump person. I don't go around going Trump, Trump, Trump. I don't have Trump paraphernalia. But I do know how corrupt our system is. And the fact that all this corruption is happening and it's flying under the radar, and then we see one little blip from the opponent who's trying to expose some of this stuff as morally questionable or sus as he is, and then people just run after him, makes it very alarming. These are what we are now know, that, you know, even in the Roman Empire, where Marius, he would put proscriptions to Sulla in the Roman Empire, and they're saying, oh, it's because of the violence that's happening, but this would actually lead to more violence. And the fact that this is happening now, and we're seeing history played out again, because this happened at the downfall of the Roman Empire. We're seeing it happen in the United States. Should alarm us. This is a clear downturn of the United States, which, you know, we are an empire. There's no doubt about that.
And so I think it is important to pray for our country and our leaders.
Yeah, so I want to go over why we probably want to go to this kind of extent, detail.
Yeah.
People know about, like, say, Murphy's Law or Wilson's Law, things like that. If I say, oh, what's Murphy's Law? Like, if you're scared of something, it's probably going to happen to you. That's Murphy's Law. Or, you know, what's Wilson's Law? Wilson's Law is, you know, what you need to prioritize is intelligence and knowledge, and then money is just going to come after. There's another law called the Kydland Law. The Kydland Law, these are one of the famous laws that people just kind of tout and know about. The Kydland Law is, you take a problem, you see a problem, what you need to do is, if you write down the problem clearly and specifically, you've already solved half of it. And so that's the Kydland Law. That's basically what we want to do in the long form of the podcast. Why is this an issue? So we sit down, instead of writing it down, we're putting it is still a graph, because we are putting it on record.
Right.
Of what actually is going down. And we want to write down as much as we can. We don't want to say there's nothing wrong. That's not true. There are something clearly wrong from Trump's side, as well as something egregiously wrong from his political opponents. And we want to be able to clearly write down what those exactly are. Because once you write it down, according to the Kydland Law, you've already solved half of it. We want to get to a solution. And that solution shouldn't be so minimized. I think that's what Christians kind of are guilty of doing. This is why, instead of following what Peter says to be sober-minded is to be clear-minded, is to understand the things that are going on in life. We're just blindly doing things. Oh, let's just pray. And that's just like a blind statement. Let's just pray. That's not how Christians function. They knew exactly what was happening, and that would inform their prayers. And so if you really want to pray for the country, know exactly what is happening to the country. When someone says RIP 1776 to 2024, there's a reason why, because something has changed in the political atmosphere. And Christians should be the ones that are the most informed, in my personal opinion. We should be the most informed, because I do believe that Christians should be the most intelligent and wise when it comes to matters concerning morality and concerning the law. But when I see the opposite, that frustrates me a little bit because people are just like, well, the jury decided it's done. What?
Yeah.
That's not how things work. And you have to know what actually went down. And hopefully, me explaining this is something that will help us follow through the Kidlin Law.
Thank you for that. And this is something that I think we'll continue to talk about in the coming weeks and months. Because, like you said, this is a very big moment for our country, and so I think we do need to continue to pray for our country and for its leaders. Any other comments that you'd like to make, Pastor Eugene, before we close for the day?
I mean, I do hope that in the end, New York will be a place which follows the law. I just don't think they are a place, and they are a place of, incredible hypocrisy where you have literally charges of hundreds of alleged looters, alleged because they haven't prosecuted in New York City.
Yep.
Just dropped. They just dropped it. These are actually people that did harm and damage to the city that they must have been held accountable for, and they just get dropped. This is New York City. So what did they do? What they want to make sure that no one is quote unquote above the law, so they go after a political opponent. It's egregious in the sense where it is not impartial. It is a biased measuring stick that they will use, and they'll use anything they can to say you've broken the law to an opponent, someone they hate. And that is not the way the justice system should function or can function. That's not justice. So for people that think that justice has happened, if you look at the facts, if you look at what grounded this court case, it just can't be true. And I get it. It's going to be appealed, and it won't stand on the appeal. I don't know. Perhaps. Who knows, right? But there's no way it could possibly stand on appeal, especially with what the judge and the prosecutor brought before the court that was allowed. It's completely unconstitutional. There was no due process where Trump was, charged of these federal crimes of election laws before bringing it into New York City to charge him with these record crimes. And so we do look forward to justice actually happening. But at the same time, I hope that we will remain sober-minded. I think that's the main prayer for me that I hope that we have. If you stay sober-minded, then these things are upsetting, but it won't get you to a place where, you'll do something immoral, like let's say riot.
Yeah.
Or cause harm or injury on other people. But you will understand what is going on, and you will fight the way that we ought to, which is on our knees in prayer, asking God for mercy, and also knowing clearly what is right and what is wrong. There's too much confusion about what is right and what is wrong because we've already decided because of our hate for one person. And that has clouded our judgment to a great degree. I do think that if you have TDS, that's something that you need to repent about. Honestly, I've come to this recognition that if you hate Trump with a passion, you just hate this person, that may be a cause for you to step back and say, maybe I need to repent. And whether you dislike what a politician does, meaning the laws that he passes, I don't know what law you, as a Christian, you would have hated that Trump passed. But let's say you just don't like his moral character. I don't know, like Russell Moore does. That's one thing. So don't approve of his moral character. That's fine. But if that clouds your judgment on everything that he does, even the laws that he passes, then I believe you're in a sick place that you need to get out of. And that the only way to get out of that is repentance.
Yeah.
And so pray for our leaders. And I disagree with like almost 100% of things that Biden does. He has completely caved to the left wing of his party. And now he's like doing this long segment on Pride Month to announce it's coming, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's sick. Yeah, that's completely morally defunct. Where are all these people with TDS denouncing that? They don't denounce it because TDS has completely enshrouded their vision to see anything else. They can't be sober-minded. You need to repent of that so that you can see things clearly. This is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong. What's good about this, what's bad about this? You need to be able to judge rightly and impartially. No more unequal weights and measures. No more weights because you hate somebody, which is not what a Christian ought to do. And even now, if I disagree with Biden to a great degree, I do wish in my heart that he would repent and turn. And if he doesn't, there is a great judgment waiting for him because he has so many lives at stake, and he wanted to just cater to them for his own, egotistical, desires to hold power, which is just evil.
Thank you for that. I think that's very helpful. And again, I think this is something that we'll track for the next coming weeks and months. And so please stay tuned for that. And that includes, also, is it TDS or DTS?
TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome. It's a real thing. Trump
Derangement Syndrome. Okay.
So if let's say you don't denounce Trump in front of someone, they'll say, oh, you must be a pro-Trumper.
Like a Trumper, because Trumper is a thing.
Yeah.
I know
so
Trumper.
They'll hate you for it. They won't even have dinner with you. Maybe if you have family members that have TDS, they won't even come to Thanksgiving and things like that. It's a real thing. I'm surprised we haven't talked about it in this podcast, but it's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that concludes our special episode for this morning. We also have a regular episode. Not that that's not special as well. We also have a regular episode out every Monday. That means today. And so please watch out for that. We thank you for listening to this special episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight.
Wow. He's running out of steam after the steam room thing.
Very hot in here.
It is so hot in this room.
Fight the good fight. Finish the race. Keep the faith. Peace.